This show is a Patreon request by Aidan Stanley. Thank you very much for your support. The year was 1998. Starship Troopers was the biggest film possible for the people that actually understood what it was about. The PlayStation console was nearing the end of its life, and the studio called SingleTrac decided to put all the knowledge it accumulated over the years by making vehicular combat games like Twisted Metal into developing a game about infantry combat. But since these were the people that made Twisted Metal and Warhawk, it wasn't gonna be your boring average kind of infantry combat. No, this infantry would have flamethrowers and rocket launchers and plasma guns. This infantry will have jetpacks and gliders and zoom around gigantic maps, blasting aliens in the face or blasting other people in the face in multiplayer. Though at first glance you may see in this game certain aspects of classics such as MDK, Outwars was in some way ahead of its time. And I'm not only referring to the way that it sort of reminds me a lot of Giants' Kabuto, at least the MechWarrior part of it with the jetpacks and the squads and the shooting a bunch of aliens on the ground that sort of look icky. But this game had something else. You see, in ages long past, shooters, action games, they all worked in a similar way. The direction you moved was the direction you shot in. The concept of a twin stick bi-directional movement and shooting mechanic wasn't so much of a thing, though you did have lock-on mechanics which let you look in one direction while you were moving in another one. Outwars had something else. It had a mode which let you move your torso independent from your legs. Now this may all sound incredibly familiar to anyone that's played MechWarrior since the first one, which debuted years earlier, but this was not a mech sim. This was not a game where you would be piloting a robot. You would be controlling a simple human being. And that's something that wasn't really done at the time. It wouldn't become the standard for every action game up until the PS2 era when you had twin mini-sticks on each gamepad. But Outwars did it years ago, and, well, it may have caused some confusion at first, but it's a very interesting way to allow you to play a game. One in which you are quite often required to move around quite quickly in all three dimensions to not be shot at by giant space aliens. The story of the game superficially resembles that of Starship Troopers. You are a Marine, a Space Marine, well, not exactly a Space Marine, you're a Jump Marine. Your mission is to jump and not die on the way down. And you achieve this through the use of a jetpack. One that comes as standard equipment for every Marine, after some training of course, and after the alien menace makes his presence known and proceeds to destroy inhabited colonies, terraforming them to better suit their biology by basically turning them into hell on space Earth. Technically Earth is in space as well, so that doesn't make sense. Your job, stop them. And you'll do this through the course of a lengthy campaign which will take you from planet to planet, fighting against the bugs, well, the skulls that sort of look like bugs, all the while enjoying an okay story portrayed with actual human beings, as was the style of the period before this kind of rendition of cinematics and cutscenes and characters was relegated to being a parody of itself. And through the course of this campaign you would acquire progressively better gear, such as more competent jumpsuits which allowed you to carry more weapons, better weapons, and even gave you more resilience. Also, you would unlock the aforementioned glider which let you just zoom around the maps. Now, you may notice that on the background the glider shows up in missions where it shouldn't be. That's because I cheated. Though in my defense, I sort of had to do this because the game does not necessarily run as it should. It starts just fine. There are some issues if you alt tab, but for the most part it runs okay, except for the timings being a bit off. Not the timers in game, no, those work fine, but the way the physics are calculated don't seem to be necessarily tied completely to the frame rate, meaning that if you try to land and you're about a meter off the ground and you cut off your jetpack, you'll sort of take damage that's maybe a bit too much, to the point where if you do that 4 times you're dead. Also, there are some missions where you're supposed to protect something, but they'll die and you will fail the mission even before you set eyes on them, no matter how much you try and rush to that place. Unless you cheat yourself a glider and travel much faster. Still, with that issue addressed by cheating, Outwars is still an enjoyable game, mostly because it offers you quite a variety of mission types. Once you get used to the controls, you'll find yourself trudging through underground mines, blowing up bugs, and possibly having Carmageddon flashbacks with certain maps, or you'll be flying around reactors, blowing them up, and then escaping before everything explodes and kills you like you're back in Descent, only this time you have a map that you can actually see, but it's not all that useful, and it's because the game is 3D but the maps aren't. Or you'll be traveling over fields and floating big chunks of rock, gigantic cliffs, blowing up everything that you can before they blow you up. And most of them won't blow you up because they're smarter than you, they'll just do it because there's more of them. The AI in the game is not what you would call the brightest, it's more of a there's a lot of them, odds are a few of them will hit you and you'll get killed. The AI is so bad that the enemy will often fall off the map, though I actually believe that's something to do with the rendering or the physics of the game not working properly. Not sure if it's something that happened in the original version or just the Windows version now. You'll see enemies that have fallen off the map and you'll have to cheat if you want to and go off the map yourself to kill them. They'll also clip through the map sometimes. Thankfully, the AI of your squad mates isn't all that bad. They are quite competent at taking orders from you, such as attacking, defending, or holding their position, which they will do to the letter, no matter where they are. If they're flying with their jetpacks, a jetpack which has limited fuel, and you tell them to hold their position, they will, because, well, your jetpack has limited fuel, theirs doesn't. Though they will die if you're not actually careful and tell them to back off now and again, to go and get healed, to maybe not get in the way when you're shooting missiles at everything that's moving. And the best part is they're not nameless, they have names, you choose them before your missions, they have lines, they have personalities, they even have their own biographies. And they're basically dispensable because you will not have problems finishing missions if they die, at least to the point where I got to. Which granted was not actually very far into the game. As usual with a lot of these games, you cannot buy Outwars from anywhere because this is a Microsoft game, and as you know, Microsoft sort of hates you. It sort of wants to erase from the memory of the human race that at one point there was such a thing as Microsoft Game Studios, which made PC games that people enjoyed and liked. I mean, there's even an ad for Age of Empires on the CD of Outwars. Not that Age of Empires is a thing that exists anymore, according to Microsoft. Still, if you find it, well, I know where you can find it, it's on the Internet Archive, you can find it right there. It's completely playable with the thing with the physics that sometimes go a bit wonky. Give it a try. It may be a bit confusing at first and kind of clunky, where you wish they kind of just assume that when you switch from the twisted torso aiming mode to the normal one, you would want your torso and legs to come back into the same position. But again, this is something that you didn't find in action games that starred human beings and not tanks or mechs in that age. Sadly, there was no direct follow-up, no evolution of its concepts made by SingleTrac because the studio went out of business in the year 2000. And while Twisted Metal continued being developed by several other studios under the big Sony family, this one wasn't. though you can see bits of it in many other games that came after it. Now, if those bits were actually taken from Outwars or if developers of all the other games came to the same ideas as the developers of this one did, well, that I can't actually tell you for sure. Parallel discovery tends to be a big thing, especially when you're dealing with people developing the same kind of games on the same platforms at just about the same time.